Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here. Today we're going to be reviewing The Time Monster, the first time I've ever seen this story, and we're going to start with episode 6, since I have been doing episodic reviews. Episode 6 is pretty good. It starts out a little rough. Don't think it's quite as good as episode 5. Has a couple rough spots, but is overall pretty good. The bit with the Minotaur at the beginning, not so great. Obviously done on film. The Minotaur design isn't overly impressive, just a guy with a bull's head on. However, it looks way better than the Naimon costume, so it's going to get a pass because it looks so much better than the Naimon costume. I like the one guy sacrificing himself to save Joe, the guy who kind of gets thrown through the foil to protect Joe. That's pretty noble. The bit when John is doing the Toro with his red coat, you know, the kind of bull going after the red cape, flag, whatever. It's just silly. Like, when I saw him doing that, I'm like, wow, okay, they're going there. And the fact that he pulls it on him twice, it just seems a little silly. Now, there is that one point when John kind of, boop, and knocks him down. This big hulking beast just, boop, knocks it down. When I saw that, I was like, no, just, boop. Any other doctor, I would have not been able to believe it. My willing suspension of disbelief would have been, John's doctor, though, gets a pass, because it's John Pertwee doctor. It's action doctor, so it gets a pass. And the fact that the Minotaur does get back up, a few seconds later, so it obviously didn't slow him down much. Once I saw that, I'm like, okay, gets a pass. And then, of course, he runs at the doctor, and the doctor just kind of steps to the side, and he plows to the wall, and that whole little bit, I was sitting there thinking as I was watching that, and I'm going, and we're back downhill again. Luckily, the episode picks up from there. Sadly, the king dies. I hated that because I liked the king. I liked the fact he went out basically chewing out the guards like, you fools. But I hated the fact he died because I liked the king so much in episode 5. I hated that he died. The whole bit about the master seizing control through a rogue faction, taking the throne, seems a little too plot convenient. Seems like it happened a little too fast. Like somehow this small contingent took over, overpowered everybody else that fast. Seems a little, seems a little plot convenient. I'm not quite buying it. It kind of happens because the plot needs it to happen. It's fine, I can overlook it, but I did feel it deserved to be pointed out that seemed like it happened too easily. I did like the fact Ingrid Pitt is doing another phenomenal job here. She doesn't have quite as much to do as she did in episode 5, but she's great here. I like that it's a testament to her character that she's not like a selfish person who just wants power like the lady in Creature from the Pit, who's just a very selfish person. In this one, it's more she wants what's good for her people and what's good for Atlantis. And she also doesn't want the king to be harmed. That was supposed to be part of her deal, is he wasn't harmed, he'll still be king. And then, when he passes away, the master will step in. And then when she finds out the king died, she immediately turns on the master. That bit about, you promised. He was old and stubborn. Seize him! See the reaction Ingrid Pitt has there of, just seize it. That's great acting. I really like that because she really looked like the character looked, visibly shaken, literally. And that she immediately turned on the master, would seize him, even though he had the face of a god. She immediately turned. I like that. I like that the character, to me, that fleshes the character out a little more than just a two-dimensional character, especially for a character that doesn't get a lot of screen time when you think about it. And I like the fact that she frees the doctor when everything, kind of goes to pot. And Atlantis is being destroyed, and the master's already escaped in his TARDIS, stealing the crystal in the confusion, that she does take time to grab a sword and free the doctor, cut the doctor loose so the doctor can run into his TARDIS and go after the master. And then she just kind of drops the sword, and just kind of stands there with that body language of all hope is gone. Like she knows it's too late. She's already messed up, and Atlantis is doomed. That last shot of her as she drops the sword is just this kind of hopelessness that she knows there's nothing she can do and it's all over. So I really like that. I don't think I've talked about the Doctor's TARDIS at all in these reviews. That TARDIS setup, I don't really care for it, but it's not as bad as some people think. I kind of got used to the walls looking a little weird, like the salad bowl look. My bigger concern is the fact that the Master's TARDIS and the Doctor's TARDIS are almost the same, except for the central time rotor, which I'm sure it's the same set. And the Master, I like the fact that they did at least change the time rotor to give it some little bit of difference. They tried a little, but I wish they'd done a little more to differentiate them. I do notice the doors look like they're on opposite sides, like the Master's opens this way and the Doctor's this way. But it's not quite enough for me to be happy with it. I do wish the walls were slightly different. I get it. It's a Classic Who budget, but just wishing in my head, I wish the Master's TARDIS had been a little more different. I like the conversation between the Doctor and the Master there when the Doctor's like, you know, I can time ramp and destroy us both and save everyone. And I like the fact it had mentioned time ramp earlier in the story. So when you think about it, that's actually a bit of foreshadowing as to what, you know, the Doctor's threatening to do here, because it talked about the time ramp in one of the earlier episodes. So it's nice to see that popping back into play here without what it is having to be explained, since we got that earlier in the story. And I love the conversation between the Doctor and the Master here. John and Roger just play that so well, because the Master's like, you won't do it. Go ahead, do it then. Go on, I dare you. Come on, let's see it, Doctor. Go on and end it all. Because you won't do it, because you'll never sacrifice her, because Jo is in, of course, the Master's TARDIS at this point. That whole interplay between them, that whole conversation, that whole scene is really, really good, and one of my favorite parts of the episode. And then when Jo realizes what's at stake, and then realizes there's a good chance the Doctor might not do it, the fact she reaches over and turns and nods like, no, goodbye, Doctor. That's a very Jo thing to do. You know, Jo is a very kind-hearted, noble-hearted, good spirit, good heart, good soul person, you know. So, of course, she'll sacrifice herself to save, you know, everyone else. That's a very Jo thing to do. I really like Jo. I haven't talked about Jo enough in these reviews. I really like Jo in this story. One, she gets a lot to do. Two, she has a lot of very intelligent moments in the story, like when she realizes the machine the Doctor is building, how it detects things in time. You know, when she tells him, it detects intermittent things in time. And even the Doctor's like, well, that's right, Jo. You're learning. That look of joy on his face that she did know. And, you know, it's a TARDIS sniffer. I enjoy that. And she has a couple other moments in the story where she's very on the ball with what's going on. And you really get this impression of how her character has grown over the course of her tenure to this point. How she's grown as a person and as a character. And how Jo is more smarter in what she does. But she's still at her heart Jo. Like the fact she was willing to sacrifice her is very much just Jo as part of Jo Grant's character. So I really like a lot of what happens with Jo in this story. And I love a lot of the moments between her and the Doctor in this. Like when she first goes in the TARDIS and he's like, are you sure you want to come? She goes, well, that is my job, remember? And he's like, you know, he says that other thing to her and she's like, yes, sir. Yeah, I love that little scene. It's just, they have such a wonderful bond. And part of that, of course, is that John and Katie had such a wonderful bond and got on so well together. But 3 and Jo got to be one of the best TARDIS teams. There's such a strong bond between these characters and such strong affection they have for each other, such a strong friendship. And you see that throughout the course of this story. That's on full display. They have several of those little moments when they talk to each other where I'm like, that is just the most adorable thing, and I love it. The part at the end when they talk to Kronos is a little odd. That is not realized the best. You know, when they're in that other space, it's not realized the best. And then when you just see the face appear on the screen, I get it's 1972. You got to do what you can to kind of give it this otherworldly look. But I think they pulled it off better with, like, say, the Mind Robber than what they're doing here. It just doesn't quite work. Now, I love the fact they get to meet Kronos, and I like the fact that Kronos isn't exactly what they thought. And how Kronos explains, you know, I can be destroyer and creator. You know, I can bring life, I can give death. Even the Doctor thought Kronos was just kind of, you know, a carnivore that destroys, the worst of the lot, as he said. So to find out there's more to Kronos than that, than even the Doctor knew, It's fascinating. I like that. I also really like the fact they had Kronos portrayed as a woman, because I didn't see that coming. I think for 1972, that's pretty impressive, too, that it's actually a woman form we're seeing for Kronos. I like that. I didn't expect that, and I think that was really clever. And the fact that Kronos can be benevolent and kind and frees the Doctor and Joe, and that the Doctor requests the Master to be saved. Now, my only complaint is I don't like quite how, please, Master, take me with you, the Master got. I could see the Master asking the Doctor, but I feel like and I think this is less on Roger and probably more on the directing. I feel like the Master wouldn't grovel quite that much. It was a little too much for me. Other than that, Roger puts in a great performance, as Roger always does. He is my favorite Master, but that little grovelly bit was a little too much. Although I like how he completely kind of reneges on it, shoves Joe in the TARDIS, runs into his TARDIS, and leaves. That's very much the Master, very much so. And it's interesting, because this is another opportunity where the Doctor could have been rid of the Master, because Kronos is going to keep him there and torture him for eternity. And you have to wonder in hindsight if maybe the Doctor should have. Because think of all of the future atrocities the Master causes, all the future deaths the Master causes, including Gallifrey being destroyed again in the Whittaker era. And you have to wonder if that haunts the Doctor sometime, all of the future sorrows and travesties that could have been averted if he had stopped the Master, if he had let the Master, be taken away by Kronos here, if he had kept Missy locked up in Series 10 instead of letting her out. Would Gallifrey still exist? And I have to wonder sometimes if why 13 is so indecisive after Spyfall, where she seems to get very insecure, very on the back foot, is her being unsure of her actions because of things with the Master, like from the Time Monster, from Series 10 when she let Missy out, or when Capaldi let Missy out. What if the Doctor had at some point stopped the Master permanently in some way where the Master couldn't be affecting things, like at the end of the Time Monster? Would the Time Lords, would her entire people have been destroyed? And maybe she's living with the consequences of that action, and that's what's eating away at her, causing indecision. So I kind of like having that in my head, that's maybe part of the reasons why the 13th Doctor is the way she is after Spyfall, when she could have stopped the Master for good here, but didn't, because, the Doctor wouldn't wish that kind of eternal torment even on the Master. I like that. And then, of course, it's nice that we get the last shot, back at the facility. We get Benton back to normal. I like the fact that right there at the end, when everybody else is kind of laughing about Benton's situation, when he's like, what's going on? And everybody's kind of having a laugh. The Brigadier is not. He's just staring at him like, what the? Benton, why are you not in your uniform? Like the last shot you see of the Brigadier, he's not laughing. He's in shock, like, what the? You could imagine right after the camera stops, he's like, Sergeant Benton, shouldn't you be in uniform? Why are you at... I like that. That's very in character for the Brigadier, and I like that Nicholas Courtney played it like that instead of laughing along with the rest of them. I really like it. It's a subtle thing. It's a very nuanced thing, but I really, really liked it. Going on to the story as a whole, I think it's better than its reputation. I think I prefer the Mutants, because the Mutants never really drags. I think all of its 6 parts are pretty well done, at least on first watch. The Time Monster drags in the middle for me. Episodes 3 and 4, to me, have a lot of filler in it. And a bit of silliness, too, like that little thing that the 3rd Doctor MacGyvers up with the corkscrews. That's just silly. There's definitely some filler moments in those. I really liked episode 1 and 2. Episodes 3 and 4, like I said, it kind of drug. I'm not saying they're bad, they're just kind of meh. And then I really liked episode 5. Episode 5 is probably my favorite episode of the story. It's the most different. And then I enjoyed episode 6 for the most part. It had a couple of rough spots, like the stuff with the Minotaur and the stuff when they're talking to Kronos, which is a little rough. But the rest of the story I really liked. The performances are good. The female scientist, she only really irked me in the first episode with her thing about men. But once that toned down, she was fine. She did have some really creative moments, which I really liked. And the fact she was able to free the Brigadier and the unit soldiers was pretty cool. I like that. The guest cast do a pretty good job. The main cast are good in it. Again, John and Katie have a lot of really good moments together, plus a lot of really good individual moments in it. Roger's good, just like Roger's always good. Nice to see Benton in it. I really enjoyed the one episode when Benton got to kind of be clever and realized that the phone call from the Brigadier was not from the Brigadier. So he snuck around, snuck back in through the window and got the drop on him. I did like that. I thought it was interesting that we only got Mike in part of the story, is Mike Yates, because he does get hurt when he gets hurt in that explosion. You know, you see him at the beginning of the next episode kind of covered in blood, and they have to send him off, you know, kind of to the hospital. So that's kind of realistic. It's neat that the explosion did hurt him and that we don't see him the rest of the story because he's hurt. So that's pretty neat. It's a good season finale, I think. I definitely think the story is better than its reputation. The restoration looks really good. A lot of the location work looks less grainy than it tends to. Like, they did a really good job with the location work. And then, especially in the studio, the colors really pop. Like, if I didn't know that these were not the master tapes, I think, for the most part, I wouldn't know that they're not the master tapes. Because the episodes look really, really, really good. So yeah, I mean, it has some issues, like the Kronos creature does look a bit naff. Sometimes, when there's some effects on it, it looks a little better, but it does look a bit naff. And then some of the other effects don't quite work either. But some of the effects work good, like the TARDIS is separating at the end of episodes, 5 or so, or 4 or 5, whichever one that is. It's really good. Episode 4. Looks really good. So it's a mixed bag on effects. But I liked it, and I've seen every John Pertwee story now. That's crazy. I've seen every 70s story now, because I just recently finished watching all of the Tom Baker era, seeing Invisible Enemy, so that's complete. I've seen every story from the 70s. So that's the first decade of classic Doctor Who that I've seen every story from. That's kind of crazy. It's been interesting. So the Time Monster, what do you think of it? Comment down below and let me know. Does it ebb and flow depending on episodes for you, like it does for me? Other things to do, don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button. That helps me out, and I certainly appreciate it. My goal is to reach 1,000 subscribers in 2023, and we are almost at 900 as I record this. So I would certainly appreciate that if you enjoy my content. If you really enjoy my content, I also have a Patreon with several different tiers to choose from. There's a link to that down in the description below. That does help me keep the bills paid, keep these beautiful limited editions paid for. So I certainly appreciate that. I want to give a shout out to some of my top tier patrons, Unknown289, Colin Coney, Dr. Finn Perkins, and Stephen Crane. I appreciate their continued support, as I do the support of all of my patrons at every tier level. I also have a P.O. box if there's anything you would like to send me to look at and review, Doctor Who or otherwise. And I link to my Amazon wish list is down there as well. I update that regularly, so check that out. Most importantly, though, thank you for watching.